The first set of theories we are going to be investigating are called strain theories. Strain theories are focused on the role played by intense stress in shaping delinquency. The first of the theories we are going to study is Robert Merton's theory of anomie. Robert Merton developed a very important early theory that attempted to explain the connection between socioeconomic status and juvenile delinquency. Merton developed his theory in response to what were, at that time, current understandings of juvenile offending. Many early theories of juvenile offending were focused on immigrant communities, and they argued that immigrant communities in cities were socially disorganized. Now, Merton was born Meyer Robert Shklonek, and he lived in a very immigrant community in South Philadelphia, right? And this community was interpreted from the outside as a slum. Merton changed his name to Robert K. Merton when he received a scholarship to Temple University. And this was at a time in the United States when there was a lot of anti-Semitism, and having a name that identified him as being a Jewish person of Eastern European origin was going to make life in the university very difficult. When he was doing the work that led to the development of this theory of social structure and anomie, the dominant explanations of delinquency argued that youth crime was the result of slum communities that were disorganized. Merton, having grown up in one, had a different perspective. He argued that these communities were really not disorganized. They might look different than the middle class and upper middle class communities that the majority of academics came from, but these communities were organized. He argued that there was something else, something that could even cross social class and community boundaries that explained delinquency. Merton was interested in the role played by social structure, particularly the idea of the American dream. So here in the United States, we have an ideal that we refer to as the American dream, and it's the idea that people have equality of opportunity and are able to move up the social class ladder through hard work and perseverance. Right? We can think about the idea of the rugged individual. We assume that all people have the same set of opportunities available. Now, Merton argues that some people realize they don't have the means to achieve that set of idealized goals that we call the American dream, at least through means that are endorsed by society. But we're all told from the time we are little that we should have similar goals, right? Particularly the idea of the American dream as being material success. Merton argues that young people experience anomie when they realize that while they desire material success, they don't have access to the socially approved means to achieve that success, and this leads to anomie. Merton defines anomie as a state of dissatisfaction that arises from the difference between a person's aspirations and the means that a person has available to them to accomplish those aspirations. Merton was interested in how people might go about trying to achieve the American dream or material success. So thinking about the set of approved goals or what we're told we should aspire to. Now, we have legitimate means. This is what's considered normative actions for trying to achieve material success. The idea that you're going to go to school, you're going to work hard, you watch others who are successful, at least in the bounds of normative behaviors, and you try to follow what they are doing. Merton also found that people sometimes pursue illegitimate means or non-normative actions. And we can think about some of the non-normative actions that people might pursue to achieve the American dream. This is the reason I have photos of Spud Webb on the right side of the slide. So Spud Webb is 5'6", right? He's only 3 inches taller than I am, but he played in the NBA. Now, he couldn't play using what were considered legitimate means. He had to do what Merton would call innovation. Right? Spud Webb innovated and developed new ways of playing the game of basketball. Like he flew through the air, he dunked, he ran between people's legs. He deviated from all the normative expectations for playing basketball. I'm using these pictures to illustrate the fact that although somebody engages in behavior that may deviate from expectations, and they may use illegitimate means, this does not necessarily mean that they are committing a crime or they're involved in delinquency. So illegitimate means, this just means that the means are non-normative. Merton theorized that people would respond to that feeling of anomie in one of 5 ways, and these ways are what Merton calls adaptations. So a person could engage in conformity. Here, the individual has accepted the culturally approved goals and they're attempting to conform to social expectations. So this would be the kid who's trying to be wealthy and successful, and they try to obtain wealth and success by excelling in school and trying to get a high-paying job. Right? This person might not get there, but they're sure going to try hard. Innovation. What happens here is that the individual realizes that they lack the socially approved means to attain the goal, and they resort to innovative, norm-violating behavior to do so. This response is frequently associated with delinquency, but not always. Right? Remember that violating norms doesn't always constitute delinquent or criminal behavior. Here's an example. One of my favorite illustrations of innovation is this guy named John Elder Robinson. John Elder Robinson was born in the 60s, right? And as a kid with autism, he realized that he wasn't going to be able to make it through high school or college because of some significant issues he had, especially with social skills. Now, he was a really bright guy, and he was interested in electronics and musical instruments. And at that time, Boston had a up-and-coming rock and roll scene. And John Elder Robinson used his electronic skills to end up designing these really amazing light shows for some of the top acts of the time. Right? He designed light shows for Kiss and Pink Floyd. Now, this was not done through the usual set of channels. Right? He didn't complete high school. He didn't go to college. He was deviant, but he innovated. So innovation can involve delinquent behaviors such as drug dealing or theft in an attempt to secure material goods, or it could just involve behavior that breaks the norms. Ritualism. In ritualism or ritualization, the individual tries to strictly adhere to culturally approved methods for attaining their goals. Then they realize that, oh dear, these attempts I'm making are not going to work. So they experience anomie and begin to modify or abandon their cultural goals, but they persist on using the same methods. Here's an example of ritualism. This doesn't involve offending. During my undergraduate days, I was pre-med. And if you're pre-med, there's a class you have to take called organic chemistry. I absolutely hated organic chemistry. But when I started, I was like, well, I did really well. I got an A in general chemistry, so I'm going to get an A in organic chemistry. After the first exam, I was like, ouch, I'm having trouble. So I started to study more. I got a study partner. I made all kinds of models of molecules. I took the second exam. This was even worse. I downgraded my goal. I was not going to get an A, but maybe I could get a B. So I worked harder. I studied more. I made more models. That other exam, the next exam didn't go so well. My goals shifted, right, to passing the course. Right? I just wanted to survive the course. I still kept studying, worked with my study partner. I made all kinds of models, right? But I was not even thinking anymore about getting an A. Right? I was engaging in ritualism. Retreatism. What happens here is that the individual realizes that they're not going to be able to attain the goals, and they abandon the cultural goals and the means for attaining them. So this could be people who are like my parents who live off the grid and try to focus on self-sufficiency. It could, for Merton, the best example of this was somebody who retreated into chemical dependency. Rebellion. In rebellion, the person abandons the goals of society and the approved methods for achieving those goals. But what they do is they create their own goals and means for attaining those goals. So we could think about the hippies during the 1960s, the members of the Black Power movement in the 1970s, the Arab Spring in the 2000s, Occupy Wall Street in 2012. Rebellion could be revolutionary, or it could be an attempt to create more opportunities and spaces for alternative ways of being inside the current system. Now, which of these adaptations is the most common? Generally, people conform, and people conform because it's very hard to go against the flow. People have expectations of you, and you don't want to make them upset, and nobody wants to go to jail. So for that reason, conformity is the most common of the adaptations. There are some potential criticisms we could make of Merton's concept of anomie. First, only a few members of the poor and working classes are participating in frequent delinquent behavior. And so how do we explain that if this frustration due to lack of the American dream and lack of opportunity causes the problems? The explanation also attributes delinquent behavior to a single cause, which is the lack of economic opportunity, and it doesn't take into account factors such as family or school experiences. Merton also is really only looking at delinquency in one social class, and when he was developing his theory, he was focused on young men. And so there are some questions about whether this theory works as well for young women. What we're going to be looking at next is Agnew's attempts to build on Merton, but Agnew develops Merton further in Agnew's general strain theory.